When I was little, Disney's Beauty and the Beast was one of my favourite films. Today, I still have a strong nostalgic love for the film and its characters. Like many young people, I related to Belle. She was the outsider, misunderstood, intelligent, adventurous, beautiful. These are characteristics we all see, or desire to see, in ourselves. The allure and story were made even more exciting by the darker fairy tale and romance. Moving past this nostalgia and critical acclaim was always going to be a battle for any media attempting to replicate the film. However, in 2017, we saw Beauty and the Beast remade into a live-action film with director Bill Condon. It followed other recent remakes of classic Disney films such as Alice in Wonderland, Jungle Book, and Cinderella. Their box office success proved to Disney that there was a strong market for these live-action remakes. Compared to most Disney movies, Beauty and the Beast is a darker tale of imprisonment, curses, magic, and a man and his servants twisted into less than pleasant forms. And that's not even mentioning the toxic masculinity and bad boy gone good elements of the story. Also, for me, it was my favourite Disney movie and therefore I bared my teeth going into that cinema. Nostalgia played an important role for me in seeing this film. I was ready to beat it to death, protect my precious original. But my love for the characters and story bullied me into buying a ticket the very weekend it came out and seeing what was in store. So let's go. For those that haven't seen either version of Beauty and the Beast, okay, where have you been? The story follows Belle, a bored bookworm longing for adventure. Her father is captured by a strange beast man and she trades herself for his freedom. We find out the beast and his servants are cursed by a sorceress for his cruelty and vanity, and he needs to find true love to be freed.
As punishment, she transformed him into a hideous beast.
Cue them warming up to each other through various great songs and moments.
Well, there are a couple of things in here you could start.
Well, who'd have thought?
In the finale, the man that Belle jilted, Gaston, leads the town in a rally to murder the beast after locking up Belle and her father. Belle escapes, Gaston dies by his own foolishness when Beast spares him, but Beast is fatally wounded. Belle admits she loves him, the curse is broken, all are restored to true form, and they all live happily ever after. Simple. Kind of. The 2017 film opens with Hattie Morahan's narration explaining the Beast curse. I really like this choice to show the Beast human, but also colourfully paint his face entirely. He's already hidden behind a fake facade and not his true self, the self we meet in the climax. It also creates a familiarity with the audience and the character of the Beast. I'm sure I'm not the only one that had become accustomed to, and therefore preferred, the Beast in his curse form than human from the original. We meet the servants in their human form and see the lavish emptiness of the Beast's previous life. Then we jump into Belle, kicking off what the original did with very similar visuals. The story follows many of the same beats as the original with no major changes to the plot overall. It does include a couple of small subplots following Belle's pursuit of learning about her mother and Gaston trying to leave Maurice to die only to be rescued by the town spinster. Ultimately, these little plots don't add much to the film and honestly act as padding for the most part. There are two reasons I like them though. I really enjoyed the magical book the sorceress left the Beast as a sort of psychological torture against his vanity. It also leaves a lot of room to imagine Belle and the human Beast off on their own adventures after the conclusion of the film. Beyond that, Maurice's expanded subplot did include this scene, which is great.
I will feed you to the wolves!
Don't stop it! Breathe! Think happy thoughts. Go back to the war. Blood, explosions, countless widows.
Widows.
Yes, yes. That's it. That's it.
Maurice! Please forgive me, old bean.
However, as much as I praised the film, I want to point out some moments I felt were a little lackluster or pointless. Again, just my opinion. The Maurice plot was pretty boring, something that I felt in the original too, to be honest. I just wanted to get back to the action and more interesting characters. As great and reasonable as it is for Maurice to try to save Belle, it just wasn't super interesting. Condon does spice his subplot a little, with Gaston actually offering to help, only to try and leave Maurice to die, which is not what happens in the original. The spinster sorceress reveal felt pointless. It's obvious and it feels like a weak motive for the townspeople to encourage normality in marriage, but I guess Condon wanted a double bluff of, hey ho, spinster is a sorceress. And a narrator, fun fact. They should have given her more of a character if they wanted to implement the sorceress more into the plot, and maybe then it would be worthwhile. It just felt tacked on and a bit eh. In the original, Be Our Guest was controversially my least favourite song. It felt too busy, over the top and sudden, and I feel similar in the 2017 film. Watson looks a little awkward and unsure what to do with herself as the CGI fest goes wild with too much to keep an eye on. The song itself is fine, but the translation to screen just does not work for me. Watson portrays Belle brilliantly. She has the youthful look, the beauty and charm needed for the role, and although her voice does struggle at times in the songs,
Easy to remember, harder to move on.
I really enjoy her in the role. I think she fits very well, and prior to the film she was very enthusiastic about being involved, and it is a fairy tale that a lot of people have grown up with. How she portrays Belle and how she fits the role is important, and I believe she does fit it, and both physically and in her acting. It works. I liked the addition of making her the inventor instead of Maurice. This makes her more of the oddball than Maurice, because while we don't see him interact with the townspeople much, he seems to be more accepted than her. We see her taking her inventing skills to get a job done better, and then the townspeople mock her for it. The backstory of her life was interesting because they involved real-life elements of the plague, and maybe that wasn't necessary for a Disney film, but I just like the little historical touch. However, other than the trip to Paris, I don't think the ideas really impacted the overall story of the film much. And again, we're still clearly designed as mildly interesting padding. It works, but bit iffy. I appreciate Condon putting his own spin on things. Dan Stevens played the Beast, motion captured, clunking around set in his large grey suit on stilts. It makes his performance even more impressive. Stevens explained the separate facial capture made the performance more humane. He's quoted, "It's quite amazing to see what can get through the eyes, which are the last human element in the Beast." The addition to the Beast character makes sense. He's isolated, trapped in the castle, and reads to pass the time. He's now a direct parallel to Belle and gives them more to bond over. These additions do work in the story, because there are scenes where you see them reading over dinner together, or spending time in the library together. It adds to the moments that make them bond. Even prior to arriving in the castle, Belle already felt trapped in her town, just like Beast feels trapped in his castle. It also makes sense that, as a noble, he is literate. One of my favourite scenes have him and Belle bickering over Shakespeare, and Belle's excitement at discussing literature with someone.
Actually, Romeo and Juliet's my favourite play.
Why is that not a surprise?
I'm sorry?
Well, all that heartache and pining and so many better things to read.
Like what?
It feels so human, and while that adds to Beast's arrogance, you also begin to see a spark of a bond between the two. Luke Evans was a standout to me in the film. I enjoy watching actors enjoy themselves in their roles, and Evans takes charge and has fun. Physically, Evans doesn't have the biggest muscles, but damn does he have the biggest ego in Gaston.
You are the wildest, most gorgeous thing I've ever seen. Nobody deserves you, but at least I know our children will be beautiful.
The little additions to his character were funny, but also made Gaston more dangerous. I actually enjoyed his scenes far more than the original, as I really felt his enthusiasm and enjoyment of the role. The 2017 remake went further with the macho misogyny of Gaston with his pride and vanity, to a satirical level.
I will feed you to the wolves!
Gaston's motivations became less about attaining Belle and more about feeding off the violence and destruction his quest causes. He doesn't kill the Beast because he sees him leap for Belle. but is desperate to win the fight and slay the beast. Likewise, when Maurice mocks him and says,
"You will never marry my daughter,"
he leaves him to die in retaliation, his pride hurt. As for the rest of the characters, the cast is spectacular. The film features Josh Gad, Audra McDonald, and Ewan McGregor in supporting roles, all of whom already have musical experience. I really like the overall diversity of the cast. I don't really have any complaints about casting. In my opinion, the casting is pretty perfect. I also really like the line referring back to the original.
And you must be his grandmother.
Grandmother, attack!
And the younger Emma Thompson being cast now. It did make me think even as a child that the human Mrs. Potts looked a little old. Even so, it was just a funny little callback. Although I will say I still prefer Angela Lansbury's version of Beauty and the Beast. Thompson's Cockney is way too distracting. This is where nostalgia wins for me. Lansbury's vocals are a classic when it comes to singing Beauty and the Beast. The 1991 film was the first animated film to be nominated for Best Picture Oscar, and it's no surprise given the stunning visuals of the dark, twisted castle, the beast, and the different townsfolk and animated objects. Transitioning this feat into live action with so much magic and need for CGI would be difficult, and the audience wasn't initially met with the most promising of results. However, for me, this worked. Yes, having some of your main characters be talking objects in a live action film is pretty tricky, but the human face imprinted on a plain old teapot worked for me. It just showed how distorted and unnatural these people were and felt in their forms. With the exception of the very humanoid Lumiere, most of the characters are plain objects with human facial features etched into their front. It is creepy and disturbing, but that discomfort works to make you want them to be returned to their normal form. You root for them. Sarah Greenwood was nominated for an Oscar for her production design on this film. She based her work primarily on the time period of 1740s France. The enormous scale of the castle and the world inhabited by the characters is emphasised by the wide sweeping shots to take it all in. Due to the budget, they were able to make a lot of the set from scratch with high detail that comes together gorgeously. It looks realistic, and that's something that the camera doesn't fail to take in. Likewise, Jacqueline Duran's costume design was Oscar nominated. I adore the costume design in this film. It keeps the cartoonish colour of the original, but occasionally adds its own flair. Belle's blue dress is a bit messier, tucked up to demonstrate her working nature. Her iconic yellow dress has a spark of magic to it as well, with parts of the castle literally adorning her dress. I especially have to talk about the famous ballroom scene, where Belle and the Beast dance for the first time. I love how they did this scene so much. Of course, the original was beautiful, but the lighting in the ballroom scene is stunning. How it dims when she dips to introduce an array of sparkling lights and colours above them, the camera going low to take in the beauty of the shot as the two realise there is something strong between them. It's an absolutely stunning shot. They can't keep their eyes off each other. Again, a feat for Watson with that clunky suit and heavy shoes threatening her. With these colours and the way that Condon has shot the film gives it that sort of magical feeling about it. It feels like a fairy tale. A Moment Lasts Forever, Evermore, and Days in the Sun were composed by the original composer of the 1991 film, Alan Menken, to include in the new film. Many of the original film's songs are kept in this film. My favourite song of the new editions was Days in the Sun. I listened to it for weeks after. It's a beautiful song. Its tone is sombre and heartfelt. Everyone in the castle gets involved in the song in some form, and I love Belle's reflective line here.
I was
innocent and certain. Now I'm wiser but unsure. I can't go back into my childhood. All those precious days, one that my father made secure. I can feel a change in me. I'm stronger now, but still.
Belle is contemplating everything she's learned and experienced so far. I like her acknowledging the struggles of growing up and taking on these responsibilities to grow. The line about retreating into one's childhood I feel is very poignant and something a lot of people can relate to when faced with these struggles. The song itself is a gorgeous group number tinged with sadness and hope. It fits the tone of the previous scenes and their revelations about the Beast, his father, and changing feelings. The slow and heartfelt song reminds me a lot of the titular song and Alan Menken's new song for the film, Evermore. Evermore was another great addition and comes a close second to Days in the Sun for me. It feels appropriate for the Beast to finally have his own song. Like Days, it's sad but hopeful, with the visuals focused on the Beast ascending his huge castle to watch Belle race away. He talks about the positive changes that have overcome him and the vulnerability of falling in love with Belle. The song ends as Belle finally disappears from the frame. It's a song that tells of his pain, but also growth as a character. All three main characters express this trait in different ways, and the film demonstrates the negative effects this deadly sin has on the characters. Gaston is the most obvious of the examples, and his obvious desire to have Belle as a trophy wife. While other women swoon over him, he rejects them all, believing only Belle is beautiful enough to be his wife.
It's never gonna happen, ladies.
Also, there's literally an entire song about how much Gaston actually loves himself, and basically how much the town back this up and love him too. He's clearly loving the intention the whole way through the song. It is this vanity that kills him, as he cannot allow another man to have Belle or win over him, causing his own death. The Beast's vanity is what triggers the curse at the beginning of the film, believing himself too good to host a beggar woman and ignoring the needs of others. His comeuppance here is his curse. But even in his beast form, he still believes himself best than others and lauds his entitled attitude over Belle and the other characters. When he realises he doesn't need to have this attitude and to be a good person, the curse is lifted and he can be happy. Even Belle displays a little vanity. She looks down on her town and doesn't seem hugely interested in integrating herself in with them. In the original, I was always a little put off by her slightly entitled attitude. But in the remake, she actually does try and fit in with them. She tries to give a little girl literacy lessons. She's very friendly, talkative to all of them. But the problem being, she is bullied for this by them. And she is mocked and treated poorly. That being said, she still looks down on them for it. She wants to learn and grow, and she sees them as being stuck where they are. However, when she meets the servants, and they are there to serve her, she is kind and treats them as equals, and in the end the townsfolk are invited to the ball. Ultimately, Belle moves on from this vanity and becomes even more accepting of everyone. Belle feels like an outsider in her town. This is clear. She doesn't fit in and they call her weird. However, Belle doesn't seem to mind too much about her outsider state. She doesn't try to blend in with the crowd and enjoys her individuality. Furthermore, she is the outsider the castle's inhabitants crave, and her status at this is embraced until she becomes one of them, no longer an outsider. If it weren't for her outsider status, she may not have been welcomed in so readily. The Beast is in forced exile due to his curse. He is forgotten and wolves surround his wintry castle. However, he also exiles himself from his staff, who band together to mourn over his previous life. He was an outsider at the start of the film too, with his extravagance and wealth, a lifestyle very unlike the life the townspeople lead. He continues to be an outsider until the end, when he accepts Belle into his life as an equal, and is seen embracing his servants at the end when he was cold and dismissive throughout the majority of their interactions. And finally, Gaston is also an outsider, despite how much the town adore him. 2017 expands on this outsider theme by having him refer to the war a lot, such as when he laments something missing from his life.
Ever since the war, I felt like I've been missing something. And she's the only girl that gives me that sense of... je ne sais quoi? I don't know what that means.
He hides his violent tendencies from the town, and then rallies them into violence. He doesn't seem to want to fit in. He says he wants a normal life with Belle, maybe the odd hunt occurring. Although I don't really believe Gaston would be satisfied with such a boring, plain life in Condon's film. The majority of the characters seem to band together at the end, accepting each other. Gaston's the only one who refuses to, and he dies for it. He doesn't want to integrate himself, he wants to be on top, the star. He doesn't want to be an equal. The theme of freedom ties into that of the outsider. Belle, Beast, and the servants all crave freedom. For Belle, freedom changes when it becomes freedom of choice. Choose to stay or go. Beast lacks the freedom to explore, he must suffer for his actions, and his freedom is restricted. Venturing out is dangerous and terrifying. However, when Belle enters his life, he's more open to freeing himself. They visit Paris, and he even mentions seeing some of the tourist spots there. Like Belle has given him the confidence to explore these places again. Together, they are free. And so, in conclusion, I feel the remake does celebrate the things that make its predecessor great, the songs, the visuals, the characters, while also using the opportunity to expand upon the characters and create a larger world for them. Belle's desire to see Paris, Gaston's exploit in the war, Beast's party boy lifestyle featuring clown makeup and devastating family life. These subplots are fine for character growth even though they don't impact the story very much. There's a lot of respect for the original, and they don't shamelessly copy it shot for shot in live action. It has become its own tale as well. There's a lot of love for the original here. It's a wonderful piece of film that celebrates a fantastic Disney classic.